Hey guys, American Movie Freak Tracy here. Thanks so much for joining me again. I decided I wanted to get another review out there if I could tonight, which is Saturday night. It's really late right now, but I want to at least have a couple to work with so I can get them posted tomorrow, and maybe I'll do a couple more recordings tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. But for this one, I really wanted to get this one out because I really think this film is important. I want to talk about Sound of Freedom. Sound of Freedom released in early release Monday, July 3rd to limited theaters, but it opened nationwide on Tuesday, July 4th, and it's a great film for a couple of reasons. But before I get into that, let's talk about some of the details. Sound of Freedom is PG-13, and it's actually produced by Angel Studios, which is a very small studio that handles production of smaller type films. So it's not a major studio film. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. The runtime is 2 hours and 11 minutes. And then about 30 seconds after the credits start to roll, there's a special message from the main star of the film, who of course is Jim Caviezel in this case, and also you see Mira Sorvino as well, but although her role as the wife of the main character is fairly small, we only see her maybe 3 times, I think, in the film. And so it's a minor role, but it's nice to see Mira Sorvino again on the silver screen. Now, this film is rated PG-13 for thematic content, which involves a very difficult topic of sex trafficking. It also has violence, it has some language, it also has some sexual references, as well as drug content and smoking throughout the film. Okay, let's get down to the difficult piece of this film. It's a wonderfully made film, and the thing about this film is that it's about a very important topic that we need to know about, and as difficult as it may be, because this film really is difficult to watch, because it deals with a major problem that has become so bad in the world today that it takes somebody to have the vision to do this movie to get the word out. And it's really unfortunate that it had to be done, but I do think that it had to be done. And I applaud Jim Caviezel for being part of it. He's been very gracious, very humble about the role. You can see that in the special message that he gives at the end of the film. He portrays in the film a man by the name of Tim Ballard. Now, Tim Ballard was an FBI agent who worked in the sex trafficking realm, let's just say that, and for years he worked hard to try to arrest these horrible people who are kidnapping children and putting them into the sex slave arena. And hearing him talk about it in the past, he talks about how ineffective his job was, because it was oftentimes tied down by bureaucracy, and he couldn't do a lot of the times the things that needed to be done in order to save the children, because that's really what it's about. It's not about the people who go and do it, although I personally see them as heroes and I applaud their efforts. It's not enough. We all need to do our part, and that's kind of what the film message at the end that Jim Caviezel gives talks about. It's not about Tim Ballard even, but they're doing the best that they can. If you do decide to go see this film, and I highly recommend you do it to support them as they get the message out about this horrific epidemic that's going on in our world today. The first hour is very emotional and very hard to watch, but honestly, I think it should be mandatory watching for everyone as they get older. Maybe not in, I don't think elementary school we should be showing these kids, but I think all adults should be watching this film, and teenagers should really be seeing this film so they can understand that this kind of stuff is really going on in this world and needs to be stopped. Tim Ballard has set up his own organization, and it's called Operation Underground Railroad, OUR for short. he doesn't really talk about the organization in the film, but he talks about what it is that he does. He ends up leaving the FBI and goes out on his own because he feels like that's the only way he's going to be effective in trying to help these kids, because he sees how the kidnapping of these children affects real people, and he wants to save them if he can. And so he puts together this plan with this team of people to try to capture some of these creeps who are doing this to children, and setting up sting operations. And it's just amazing what he does. After about an hour, they bring in a character, and he has some comic relief. I mean, it's kind of hard to do in a film of this nature, but they're able to do it, and it kind of relieves a little bit of the emotion that you feel in the beginning of the film. Now, I mentioned that I would say something more about this. Angel Studios is a very small studio. It's not a big Hollywood studio that helps produce this film, and so they need all the help that they can get, and I'm a huge supporter of that and what they're doing. Some people may know about OUR, and Tim Ballard himself has said that it's not enough what they do. They're extracting hundreds of kids sometimes on a sting, and then they don't really have a good setup for what to do with the children to try to reintegrate them back into life after they've gone through this horrific ordeal. And so that's an area that they're lacking. So the rest of us need to step up and try to find ways to help out in that way, whether that's start another organization that will handle that piece of it for OUR, or try to route them to existing ones that can do the job for them. So they are trying the best that they can, as I understand it, but there's some gaps there, and we need to do a better job. And some of the stats that they tell in the film, and just as a full disclosure here, my stats may be off by a little bit. I'm just trying to give you an idea, but as I remember them, I want to go ahead and read them. Some of the stats that they talk about in the film, which was a surprise to me, is that child sex slavery is currently a $150 billion a year industry, which is huge. I had no idea. Another one was very shocking to me, and that was there are more children and girls enslaved today than there ever were when slavery was legal. And that stat absolutely floored me. The third one I wanted to mention, and there's a few others, again, I'm just going by memory, so these may not be completely accurate, but the idea is there. But it said within the next few years, the child sex slave industry will overtake or surpass drugs and pornography. Now that is completely shocking and unacceptable. We need to do whatever we can to get rid of this problem and be vigilant and see what's going on instead of putting blinders on. I also took a look at the website of OUR. According to the website, it says that they've impacted over 7,000 lives with over 4,000 covert operations and over 6,500 arrests of slavers and those participating in helping the slavers. Those are some of the stats that OUR's website talks about. I give this film a 9 rating, mostly because I think it's very important. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to get the word out that this is a huge problem. It's a major problem. It's going to surpass drugs. It's going to surpass pornography. It is a type of pornography, but it's even worse because you're damaging and taking away the innocence of these children, and it needs to stop. I highly recommend that if you can, go see this film, if only to support them as they try to get the word out. And they also have this really cool program they mentioned that you can pay it forward to someone. So if you want to help somebody see the film who may not be able to afford it, you can actually purchase tickets for somebody else. One other thing that's interesting to note is that this film was actually finished 5 years ago. And I remember being in an event of some kind through one of my businesses, and in the event they talked about this movie. So when I heard when I heard the rumors that it was coming out, I remembered that I had heard it was coming out 5 years ago, and I was like, wow, what happened? And in the special message that Jim Caviezel gives at the end of the film, he talks about how individuals and organizations and people were just throwing all kinds of roadblocks at them to prevent them from having this film come out. And that's a huge, huge shock and a huge shame on those people. And I'll leave it to you to figure out why they would do that. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you get a chance, because it's not a big studio film. It's going to be in the theaters for a limited time. So I recommend you check your local listings and find out where it's playing. As I understand it, a lot of the showings have been sold out, which is great because that means a lot of people are going to see it. And I did check the stats before I did this review, and as of today, the film has grossed about $21 million in the box office. With that information, I hope you make the decision to go and watch it. Just remember to take some tissue with you when you go if you tend to cry a lot. I did get emotional. I don't normally cry, and I may even have teared up a couple of times, so definitely take some tissue with you if you're an emotional type person. Thanks so much for watching this review. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please send me an email. You can do that by sending it to AmericanMovieFreaks@protonmail.com, or put a question in the comments below. I appreciate any feedback you might have. But until then, I hope to see you at the show.